Welcome, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Septic Systems 101, brought to you by the Private Well class. The Private Well class is hosted by the Illinois State Water Survey at the University of Illinois and is sponsored, funded, and supported by the Rural Community Assistance Partnership and the U.S. EPA. So to get things started, we'll just start off with a few housekeeping items. We do offer NEHA CEs for this webinar. Just keep in mind that you can only use the CEs for each webinar once per credentialing cycle. So what that means is if your credentialing cycle began on July 1st of 2025 and you attended last year's webinar, you can't get credit again for this same webinar until after June 30th in 2027. You'll see down here in the bottom right-hand corner that we have our last two dates that we presented this webinar, which were July 11th of 2024 and July 9th of 2025. When you registered for this webinar, if you marked that you needed CEs, you will automatically receive an email with your certificate in a week or two. So nothing else you have to do there, but we can also provide you a certificate of attendance, a copy of the slide deck, completed NEHA forms, and if you're in Illinois, we do also offer LEHP credits. So if you'd like any of that, you can email us at info@privatewellclass.org. So the webinar today is part of the Private Well Class program, which is brought to you by RCAP, and we're here to support private well owners as well as septic system owners, and that's why we're providing our webinar today for Septic Systems 101. This webinar follows our free well owner course, which is available at our website, privatewellclass.org. And so what the Private Well class is it's a 10-lesson class that's separate from these webinars. So you can go to our website to find out more about that. And I'll also discuss it later in the broadcast today. This webinar will be recorded and available at privatewellclass.org and also on our YouTube channel. And please note that CEs are not available if you watch the recordings online. You have to be here in person to get the CEs. And then the last thing that I want to mention is we will have time for questions at the end of this webinar. So be sure and put those in either the chat or the questions, and we will get to those at the end of today's broadcast. First off, I want to give a very warm welcome to our expert panelist, Jim Starbird. We appreciate him taking time out of his day to join us. Jim is going to be answering the questions that have been submitted before the webinar, as well as those that have been turned in during the webinar. Jim is the Regional Director of Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island for RCAP Solutions. So Jim, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. My name is Sally Dolan. I work at the Illinois State Water Survey as an environmental public health specialist with the Private Well class, and I'll be your host today. And then also on the backside of things, we have Steve Wilson, who is the lead of the Water and Public Health program here at the Illinois State Water Survey. And then we have Katie and Sarah Manderbach, who are making sure that everything runs smoothly on the backside of things. So Katie will be the one that will be handling any questions that you have today. So again, just put those questions in the chat or the questions box, whichever one is, it seems to change, so we're not sure exactly what it says on your end. So just add those questions there, and we will try and get all those answered for you. Now, I have mentioned that our funding comes from the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, or RCAP. And if you're not familiar with RCAP, it's a partnership between 6 nonprofit organizations that are spread out across the United States, and they provide technical help to rural communities. So I really recommend that you check out this map, find the region that covers your state, and get to know them because they provide a lot of great services. I work at the Illinois State Water Survey, and it's quite an honor to be a member of this establishment. It started back in 1895 as a way to address cholera and typhoid outbreaks in the state of Illinois. And from that point, it's really grown into a large survey. We have over 120 employees, and we do research all over the state as well as other areas. Now, today we're going to be talking about septic systems. And we've come a long way from when we started off with just privies in our backyard to this advanced systems that we have today. This is a fun little diagram because if you read at the bottom, it says it is believed that any 14-year-old schoolboy of average intelligence and mental ingenuity can, by following these plans, build a sanitary privy for his home. I don't know about you, but I don't know very many 14-year-olds who would be able to follow designs like this and build their own outhouse in today's society like it used to be. So it also just shows how far we have advanced in society going from an outhouse to the systems that we currently have. Now, being part of the Illinois State Water Survey, since we have a rich past, we also have some great photos. So we always try and show some of our historical photos. So this is a picture that we have of Urbana, Illinois. The photo was taken around 1915. And so you see the developing sprawl of the urban area in the backdrop of the picture. But this small building and mound are actually one of the first septic systems that they had to handle the wastewater of the city of Urbana as it was developing. So we love these slides that we have and want to share the history that we have here. So then what I'll do is I'll start off with some definitions. An on-site wastewater treatment system, or OWTS, is kind of just a generic term, and it covers any kind of decentralized system that uses natural processes or mechanical components to treat the sewage. And it can come from one or more than one dwelling, building, or structure. Whereas an individual system, which we also call just a septic system, really just refers to a system that treats one facility or one dwelling. So most of what we're going to be talking about today will be septic systems because we're doing this webinar for homeowners. So this is to help them understand the system that's in their backyard. And the reason this topic is so important to cover is because 1 out of 5 homes in the United States relies on a septic system for their wastewater treatment. So they're very prevalent across the United States. So, what is wastewater? When we talk about wastewater, we need to think of it in two forms. We have the black water and then we have the gray water. And so the way we can differentiate black water from gray water is that the black water contains pathogens that may spread by the fecal oral route. So think about when you flush your toilet, all the bacteria from the human body goes into that water, making it black water. We also can include food prep areas in Blackwater. So we've included the dishwasher here because any food particles could also contain those pathogens as well. Now, septic systems play an important role in public health because they protect our drinking water, they prevent the spread of disease, and they protect the environment. So when we think about wastewater, there are 4 main groups of contaminants that we need to manage. The first is harmful bacteria and viruses. In a conventional septic system, most of these microorganisms are removed as the wastewater moves through the soil. And some systems also include treatment units such as chlorinators or other disinfection devices that further treat the water before it's discharged. Septic systems also remove the solids, both organic, and help reduce nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus before they enter the environment. However, it's important to understand that septic systems aren't designed to remove every chemical that gets poured down the drain or flushed down the toilet. Some household chemicals can interfere with the treatment process or create problems for the system. And we'll talk about all this a little bit more later on. But make sure make sure a septic system works properly and lasts as long as possible, several things have to come together. It starts with a proper design and installation and continues with good operation and regular maintenance. When all of those pieces are put in place, a septic system can be a really effective and economical way to treat wastewater and safely return clean water to the environment. As homeowners, there are a few important questions we should be asking ourselves to help protect both public health and the environment. One of the first things to consider is the type of wastewater system on the property. Some systems that were commonly used in the past are no longer considered acceptable today. Um, for example, years ago, it wasn't unusual to find a pipe discharging wastewater directly into a ditch or a stream, or a property that was relying on a cesspool. We now have a much better understanding of how these practices can impact groundwater, surface water, and public health. A really good example of this is the state of Hawaii. Um, they are doing a major effort right now to replace and upgrade over 88,000 aging cesspools throughout the various islands that make up the state. And the goal is to reduce the pollution and bring those systems up to current standards so that they no longer pose a risk to the people or to the environment. It's also important to know your own property. Do you know where your septic system is located? Do you know where the tank is? Do you know where the drain field is? Understanding where your system is at can help you maintain it properly and avoid damaging it. You can also think about how your septic system and drinking water source interact. Where is your well located in relationship to your septic system? How close is your neighbor's well? Is your well shallow, making it more susceptible to the influences of the surface water? Or is it a deeper well, and so therefore it might be a little more protected by the geology between the surface and where your well pump sits? So we have to think about all of these, and these are all important factors to consider because septic systems don't just affect a single household, they play a role in protecting our drinking water, our neighbors, and the overall health of our communities. So when we talk about an on-site wastewater treatment system, it's helpful to think of it as having four main parts. The first part is the collection system, which that's just simply the plumbing inside and around the house. And these pipes are what carry the wastewater from your toilets, your sinks, your showers, and other plumbing fixtures out to the treatment system. Once the wastewater reaches the yard, it moves into the pre-treatment stage, which is usually just a septic tank. And in some situations, the wastewater may also go through an advanced treatment unit if additional treatment is needed. And then the final step is the treatment or dispersal area. These are often called the drain field or the soil treatment area. And this is where the wastewater receives its final treatment before returning to the environment. So now we're going to take a closer look at each of these treatment components and see how they work together to clean and safely manage the wastewater. So the septic tank or the pre-treatment unit is the first place wastewater goes after it leaves your home. And here inside the tank, that's where the wastewater naturally separates into three layers. You have the lighter materials like your fats, oils, greases, or commonly referred to as fog. Those will float to the top and create a scum layer. And at the same time, the heavier solids settle to the bottom, creating your sludge layer. Now, between those two layers, you get a relatively clear liquid called effluent. And the effluent is the portion of the wastewater that leaves the septic tank and flows to the drain field or other treatment components for further treatment. Now, the septic tank's job is to separate and store those solids and floatable materials so they don't clog or damage the rest of the system. In some situations, a conventional septic system simply isn't the best fit for the property. The lot may be too small, the soil may not treat wastewater effectively, or there may be site conditions that make a traditional drain field actually impractical. That's where advanced treatment systems come in. These systems provide additional treatment and can make it possible to install a septic system on a site that would otherwise wouldn't be suitable for a septic system. So, depending on the design, they may be used in place of a traditional septic tank or installed right after the traditional tank as an additional step. Advanced systems can be especially helpful on small lots, properties with challenging soils, or sites near sensitive environmental areas. Some common examples are aerobic treatment units, or ATUs, media filters, and constructed wetlands. While these systems are often more complex than your conventional septic system, we can provide effective wastewater treatment in areas where a standard system may not work. Uh, so, the final component is the soil treatment area, and that's where you may hear it called a drain field, a leach field, or a soil absorption field, and they're all referring to the same part of the system. Before I go into the soil treatment anymore, I'm going to try and use my pointer here. I've been referring to the conventional septic system, and I just want to take a minute to point out the parts, just in case we have some people here who aren't familiar with the layout of the septic system. So again, your first step is the plumbing in the house collects it and then it brings it out and then it comes to your septic tank. So again, this would be your pre-treatment. And this particular system, a conventional system, there is no advanced unit. So it simply goes from the septic system or the septic tank and it comes through and then it goes through the D box or distribution box. And then it's equally distributed among these trenches. And so then the wastewater will go through there and be able to drain through, go down through the soil, and then enter the groundwater. And hopefully it's been cleaned to the point that it is now safe to enter the groundwater. So I just wanted to take a minute to step back a second and make sure everyone knew what a conventional system was. So getting back to the final treatment and the dispersal, this is the area where the treated wastewater leaves the septic tank and is dispersed into the soil. As the water slowly moves through the soil, natural, physical, chemical, and biological processes are helping remove any remaining contaminants. So that's where that soil is actually your final step in the treatment process. And so again, it's filtering that wastewater and trapping and breaking down harmful microorganisms. And so by the time the water continues downward and reaches that groundwater, it's been significantly treated and that helps protect um, any future users of that water. So once we know the basic parts of a septic system, the next question is how do you figure out the right size and design for a particular property? The answer is that there's a lot of different factors that have to come into play. So one of the first things we look at is household size. A home with more people will generate more wastewater, so the system will need to be large enough to handle that daily flow. We also want to pay close attention to the soil type. Different soils absorb and treat wastewater at different rates. So, for example, a sandy soil will tend to drain very quickly, but a clay soil may take much longer time for that water to go through the clay particles. And so that can affect the size of drain field that's required for a home. The slope of the property also matters. If the site is too steep, we need to make design adjustments to prevent runoff and wastewater from surfacing. Then there's also the lot size. We need to make sure there's enough room for the septic system itself, but we also need to think about required setbacks from buildings, wells, property lines, and often you need to also consider space for any future replacement areas. So if the current system goes bad, where will a new system go? And if the property is near a lake, a stream, a wetland, a drinking well, um, we need to take extra precautions to make sure that we protect those sensitive water resources. We also have to consider weather and site conditions, such as seasonal high water table, flooding potential, freezing temperatures, because all of these can affect how well the system is performing. And finally, every septic system has to meet local regulations, which they set the requirements for the sizing, placement, and the types of systems that are approved. So septic system design is really about putting all of these pieces together and matching the system to the people who will be using it, to the land where it's going to be installed, and making sure that we follow the rules that are in place to protect public health and the environment. So, as we've discussed, septic systems share many of the same basic components, but the way these components are configured can vary quite a bit. So, the conventional septic tank and drain field is only one option. Depending on your soil conditions, groundwater levels, lot size, and other characteristics of the site, a property may require a different type of system to provide adequate treatment to the wastewater. That's why you see all these technologies such as mounds or ATUs, sand filters, drip systems. Although they operate differently, they all serve the same purpose. And so they're treating that wastewater and getting it to where it can be safely re entered back into the environment. So the key takeaway is that the septic system design is site specific. So the best system is the one that matches the condition of that property. You can't say that my neighbor has this septic system, so I need it. You have to look at your specific site and make sure that you have the right system for your land. Now, these systems can range from being very simple designs, such as the conventional septic system, or they can be very advanced, highly complex engineered systems. There's so many different variations that we could easily spend the entire day discussing them. However, we don't have all day, so we have to try and keep it a little bit condensed here. But to give you an idea of the range between them, the drawing shown here is an engineered plan for a septic system in northern Michigan. The home is located very close to the shoreline of Lake Superior, And by very close, I mean it's as close as regulations allow. And so because the site is so sensitive, a much more sophisticated wastewater treatment system was required. So instead of a simple septic tank with a drain field, the property has an extensive engineered system designed to provide additional treatment to better protect Lake Superior since it's so close. And so this is a great example of how site conditions can greatly influence the complexity of a septic system design. So this photo here is the actual side yard of the drawing that I just showed. So this is the actual location. So I don't know if you can tell, but beyond the trees, that is where Lake Superior sits. And if you look down to the left towards the front of the or towards the back of the picture, you'll see some yellow scaffolding along the decking. Well, down there, that is where the septic tank is located. And so from there, this wastewater is then pumped up into um, the two black covered lids. Those are the two peat pods or peat media filters. And so the water from the septic tank is pumped up into the peat filters, which have these black lids. There's two of them there. And then after it passes through the peat filters, it then goes to the right of the on the picture where the grassy area is, and that is actually a recirculating sand filter. And so it goes into the recirculating sand filter for further treatment before it then is released back over on the hillside to the very far right. So as you can see, this setup is a great example of how complex a septic system can actually be when you have a property as challenging as this one. One thing that I haven't mentioned is that the actual soil above bedrock is 6 inches is probably the health department being kind to make sure that they could put that recirculating sand filter on top of it because in Michigan, the requirement was that you had to have at least 6 inches of topsoil to be able to do it. And so, we can see how challenging this site is. And the homeowner had to invest a substantial amount of money in this complex system because of the property's location and the need to protect the nearby lake. However, he felt the payoff was worth it, and it's hard to argue when you see the views from his back deck. The home does overlook Lake Superior, and it is just absolutely stunning at sunset to be able to take in these views. So in this case, the beautiful lakefront view did come with a hefty price tag for that sophisticated septic system. So now we have a little quiz here. I, I'm sure some with a lot of experience, you can quickly look at this and spot exactly where the septic system is. This is actually a property that Steve Wilson and I visited during, we did an assessment of this septic system. And so before we headed out, we didn't know much about the system. And so we looked at the property on Google Earth, and everything appeared to be perfectly normal. The entire yard was green, and nothing stood out about the system. But when it came time to get driving directions for us to meet at the site, we pulled up Google Maps, and the picture looked completely different than the one on Google Earth. The image was taken at a different time of year, and so suddenly the septic system became very easy to identify. So if you look at the fenced area to the right of the house, you can clearly see a rectangular patch of disturbed soil. Here, I'll use my laser pointer here. So you can see you have your septic tank right through here. And then As you come off the septic tank, you start to see you have three distinct lines here, and those matched perfectly to the health department drawing that was done for this particular system. And so, we were able to quickly determine that, with that bright, lush green grass growing over the drain field, that something was definitely going wrong. So, whenever a portion of the drain field, when it starts receiving too much wastewater and is no longer functioning properly, that extra moisture and nutrients can cause the grass above them to grow much greener, much thicker than the surrounding lawn, which we can definitely see we have a strong indication that the septic system was experiencing problems when we went out to check on it. So that brings us to our next question. What are some of the common reasons that septic systems fail? So, what causes a septic system to develop problems like that? One of the biggest reasons is simply a lack of maintenance. Like any other part of your home, a septic system needs regular care. You need to have that tank inspected and pumped when needed as one of the best things that you can do to extend the life of the system and avoid costly repairs. Another common issue is overloading the system with more water than it was designed to handle. That's why it's important to repair leaking toilets or faucets or plumbing fixtures as soon as possible. It also helps to spread out activities that use a lot of water, such as laundry, showers, and running the dishwasher, rather than doing everything at the same time. If you've made changes to your home, it's also a good idea to check with your local permitting or regulatory agency. For example, the property in the previous photo, they had actually added two more bedrooms to the home than what existed when the septic system was installed. So more people eventually had moved into the home, but the septic system was never upgraded to handle that increase in wastewater. So as a result, the system just became completely overloaded, and that's why it was starting to fail. So proper design and installation are also critical. Septic systems are not a good place to cut corners. If your state or county requires licensing, work with a qualified professional who understands the local soils, regulations, installation requirements. They have the know-how. While many homeowners enjoy tackling DIY projects, an improperly designed and installed septic system that can really lead you to expensive problems down the road. Um, Physical damage is another common cause of failure. Heavy vehicles or equipment should never be driven over a septic system or drain field because they can crush the pipes and compact the soil. And then you also have to worry about tree roots. Tree roots can create major issues if a tree is planted too close to the septic system, as the root naturally seek out the moisture and can invade your drainage field and cause a lot of problems. And finally, there's something that's called biomat formation. So not all the solids keep from escaping your septic tank, and so you you do want kind of this nice little mat that will form that helps your system. It helps slow the water down and allows it to drain regularly. And so you want to make sure that you have that biofilm or that biomat formation is a thin layer, but if it gets too thick, then that can also lead to problems. And so when that happens, the wastewater can no longer move through the drain field and the way that it was designed, leading to potential failure. So when it comes to what should and shouldn't go into the septic system, the rule is actually pretty simple. You've probably heard people talk about the three P's: pee, poop, and paper for toilet paper. And these are really the only things that should be flushed down your toilet. These are the only things that should be going into your septic system. Everything else belongs in the trash, not down the toilet. Even products that are marked flushable, um, they can really create a problem for your septic tank. So we do not advise that you use anything, even if it's labeled as flushable, just the three P's. Items like wipes, paper towels, feminine hygiene products, diapers, cat litter, and other household waste can really clog pipes, and they can fill the tank more quickly and potentially damage the system. Um, Seeing diapers reminds me of when my oldest daughter was first born. Our very first babysitter came so my husband and I could go out for an evening, and it was maybe a day or two later, and the toilet backed up, and we could not figure out what was going on. We had to have someone come out and check the system out, and the babysitter had flushed a diaper down. Luckily, it was a newborn diaper, so it was teeny tiny, but I got the riot act for flushing the diaper down from the contractor. Um, and he was a little apologetic when I'm like, it was a new babysitter. It wasn't one of us. So that always, even when you have people come into your home, you need to make sure that they're aware of what can and can't go down the septic system as well. It's also important to be mindful of what goes down your sinks and drains. Harsh chemicals, solvents, paints, excessive amounts of strong cleaners, all of those things can disrupt the beneficial bacteria in your septic tank. And so those bacteria play an important role in breaking down the waste. So anything that harms them can reduce the efficiency of your system. Um, and by being careful about what goes into your septic system, you can help prevent unnecessary problems and extend the life of the entire system. So, with that in mind, how do you tell if a septic system is starting to fail? So, what are the warning signs that we need to be looking for? Well, it's like we saw in the picture. The first thing is, you know, you want to look at the condition of the grass over your drain field. If the rest of your lawn is brown and dry during the summer, and there's one area that's really thick and green and growing fast, that's often your warning sign that the drain field is receiving more wastewater than it should. In more severe cases, the ground may become saturated. You may actually feel or hear water squishing beneath your feet when you walk across it. I didn't experience, but I've heard the story of that there was a yard that they had laid sod down. So, the sod comes in where, it's about 6 inches thick. And so you have the grass and soil, and they just lay it on top of the existing ground. Well, they laid sod over the drain field, and whenever you stepped on the sod, they said that it actually rolled with the waves of the water underneath. So if you have anything like that, that is definitely a sign that you're having problems with your drain fields. Odors can be another indicator, although they're not always present. That picture that I showed you before, there was no smell at that house. But then last year, when I was driving to the 4th of July fireworks, I remember that passing a house, and there was a large gathering and cars lined both sides of the road. And the first thing you could smell was the odor of the septic system as you passed the house, because they had had so many guests coming over that the system was completely overloaded because they pushed it way beyond the normal capacity of the system. However, it's also important to remember that a failing septic system doesn't always have that smell, like I said before. And sometimes the problems develop and you may not be able to notice it through smell. So you may or may not have a smell as your clue. Your well water can also provide you clues. If routine water testing detects that elevated nitrate or presence of coliform bacteria, that can be an indicator that there's a pathway um, for these things to get into the groundwater. And so your wastewater could be affecting the groundwater. That contamination could be coming from your septic system or maybe even from a neighboring property. So that's the main reason that we recommend testing private wells at least once a year so you can keep an eye on those nitrates and coliform bacteria levels. And so, you want to be able to keep that regular testing to help you identify potential problems early, whether they're related to your well, surface water infiltration, or a nearby failing septic system. And then finally, the, the last condition to look for is if you begin to hear any gurgling sounds in your plumbing or experience slow drains throughout the house. Uh, Definitely, if you have sewage backing up into your sinks, bathtubs, or toilets, these are strong signs that there is something wrong. And so when those symptoms appear, it's important to have the system evaluated by a professional as soon as possible. Give me just a second, take a drink here. So, maintenance is one of the most important factors in keeping a septic system working properly. Regular inspections and pumping help prevent problems and can significantly extend the life of your system. If your system has an effluent filter, that should be cleaned as part of your routine maintenance as well. If you have an advanced treatment system, such as an ATU, there may be additional maintenance requirements. So many jurisdictions require service agreements and routine inspections by qualified professionals. So, for example, some counties require inspections every 6 months to make sure these systems continue to operate as designed. And so these advanced systems they provide excellent treatment, but they typically also require more attention than a conventional septic system. I know we used to have an employee here who, um, once she started working here and learning more about her septic system, she wanted to get her system brought up. So she had an ATU and called the contractor out, and turned out that her pump had gone bad, and the previous homeowners had disconnected the alarm. And so she had no idea that it wasn't working properly until she started learning about septic systems and understanding more. And so, it was a great lesson to be able, that she got to learn about her system, got it repaired, and got that service contract back in place. And so now, the system doesn't have any issues and is running as it should be. And it's also a really good idea to keep detailed records of the inspection. So when you have someone come out to repair that pump or pump out the tank or just provide any kind of maintenance, those records can be very helpful to you, especially if you experience a problem, because then you have the past and you have the history of the system. And so that can really help your contractor know where to start whenever they come out evaluating a problem. Um, it can also be of value when selling your home, since you demonstrate that the system has been properly maintained. It can actually increase the value of it. Another great resource for homeowners is the EPA's Septic Smart program. Well, Septic Smart Week is held each September. The information is available year round, and the EPA provides videos and maintenance tips, educational materials, and practical guidance so that homeowners can better understand and care for their systems. Um, One thing every septic system owner should remember is that no septic system lasts forever. You may hear stories from people who have had the same system for decades without any major issues, and that's certainly possible. But eventually, all systems age, all components wear out. But the good news is that with proper use, regular maintenance, and proper attention to the small problems, you can maximize the life of the system and postpone costly replacement for as long as possible. So there are several things you can do to maximize the life of your septic system. So one of the most important is to take care of the area around your septic tank and drain field. So make sure those inspection reports, the risers, the access lids, make sure they're all visible and accessible. I've seen homeowners get frustrated mowing around the PVC inspection pipes that stick up out of the ground, so they cut them off ground level. So while that may make lawn care easier, it also makes the system more difficult to inspect and maintain without knowing where it's at or being able to properly access it. So it's important to leave those access points in place so your service professionals can easily locate and evaluate the system when needed. Another way to extend the life of your system is to reduce unnecessary water entering it. Septic systems are designed to treat household wastewater, not excess water from other sources. So I'm thinking sump pumps, hot tubs, water softener, backwash. So those can add a significant amount of water to the system, and so that may reduce its effectiveness. You also want to be sure to check local regulations to determine whether alternatives such as a dry well are allowed in your area or not. It's also important to be mindful of what goes down your drain, as we've said earlier. Only wastewater should be entering the septic tank. Flushing inappropriate materials or pouring harmful substances down the drain can really interfere with treatment and shorten the life of your system. And finally, make sure your tank is properly evaluated during inspections. A key part of septic maintenance is measuring the accumulation of solids in the tank. Septic professionals, they often use a tool called a sludge judge. And so they use that to measure the thickness of the sludge layer on the bottom and measure the scum layer on the top. And they use those measures to help determine when the tank should be pumped out to help prevent solids from leaving the tank and damaging the drain field. And so by keeping the system accessible, managing water use, being careful about what enters the system, and staying on top of your inspections, you can help your septic system function efficiently for as long as possible. So we always get asked, how often should I pump it? And so, the general rule of thumb is every 3 to 5 years. But we actually have found this chart, which is a helpful tool for estimating how often a septic tank should be pumped. So keep in mind that this is intended to be a general guideline, depending on your household uses, your household use of water, the size of your tank, the amount of the solids being generated. Your system may need pumped more or less frequently. So using this chart is fairly straightforward. So for example, let's say you have a family of four and a 1,500-gallon septic tank. So you would find the row for four people and the column for 1,500-gallon tank. And where those two meet, you'll see the recommended pumping interval of 4.2 years, which falls right in between that 3 to 5 year mark that um, you typically hear given as an estimated time. But again, these are just an estimate. The actual pumping schedule should be based on the condition of the tank, the amount of the sludge and scum that have accumulated. You have to use those things. And so that's why regular inspections are so important, so you can keep track of those. And a septic professional can measure those levels and help determine the best pumping schedule for your specific system. We said earlier that every system's different, and so you'll need that professional to give you the advice on when you really need to get it pumped. So hopefully you've never had a problem with your septic system. But if you do run into an issue or if you simply have questions, it's important to know where to find reliable information. The good news is there are a number of excellent resources available. Some of the best local sources of information are your public health department, your cooperative extension, and then the professional septic contractors. Septic professionals in particular can be an invaluable resource. They're out in the field every day working with these systems. They understand the local soils, the geology, the regulations, and the common challenges in your area. Because they're trained to install, inspect, maintain, and repair these systems, they can often provide practical advice and help identify problems before they become a major issue. So if you have concerns about your system, don't hesitate to reach out to one of these resources because getting good information early can save a lot of time, money, and definitely headaches later on if you put it off and don't find out as soon as you start having problems. Another excellent resource is the EPA's septic systems website. Um, a lot of the diagrams have come from the EPA's website, and so they have this entire section dedicated to on-site wastewater systems, and it's packed with useful information. In addition to all of the Septic Smart materials, you'll find guidance on septic systems cares and maintenance, information about financial assistance and funding opportunities, as well as the available partnerships and other educational resources. There's so much information available on this site that it's worth spending some of your time exploring it yourself. So whether you're a homeowner trying to better understand your system, or if you're a professional looking for additional resources, you'll likely find material that fits your specific needs and interests. So I often recommend this site because it is so reliable with the information, and it does a great job of bringing together a wide range of septic system topics in one place. So the screenshot that I have here is at the top of the page. When you go to epa.gov/septic, but if you would scroll down on the page, this is all the different resources they have available. So you can click through those different categories and find the different things that you have questions on. I know someone put in the questions that they want to know outside of this website. Is there a place that has everything in one? And so there's not really any place that has that one where you can go to one document and it has every single system. But some of the reports and regulations and guidance manuals in this section here, they will give you a lot of information. If you're a homeowner, looking at these top 4 categories, those are going to give you the most information when it comes to having consumer geared products. And so, the Septic Smart Week, all those videos and everything are great. The About Septic Systems, where you can learn more. They have webinars, and that's where I got the different types of systems from. So you can check that out and see what all the EPA has on their website. Another um, resource that I would like to point out is the National Onsite Wastewater Recycling Association, or NOWRA, and their website's just nowra.org. And so NOWRA serves professionals who work in the decentralized wastewater industry. So this includes, your designers, your installers, regulators, educators, service providers. So they're mainly geared towards those people. But they also have a number of useful resources for homeowners. So their website includes educational materials designed to help people better understand their septic system and how to properly care for them. One particular helpful resource is their homeowner's guide to on-site systems. So when you go to the septic resources, this user guide right here, that is a great resource for homeowners. They also provide a variety of fact sheets and educational materials that help answer those common questions that you might have about homeowner or septic system ownership. So if you're looking for practical information about operating and maintaining your septic system, Nowra is another excellent source that's worth exploring. Um, Again, there were a lot of environmental health professionals that turned in questions this month. So I am going to try and provide some resources for those. There seem to be a lot of new sanitarians that could potentially be on the call today. So I would like to point out that NOWRA does have on-demand classes. So if you're wanting some more in-depth knowledge of septic systems, I would definitely recommend that you look at under their education tab and look at the classes that they have available. They are, I know, currently developing classes specifically for new environmental health professionals. So keep an eye on that. Maybe see if you can join their newsletter or join NowRes so you can stay up to date and learn more about the products they have coming out soon. Another useful site for wastewater professionals is onsitewastewater.info. Some of you may remember it as the old H2O&M website. This site has been redesigned and updated in the last couple of years, and it was originally developed by the University of Minnesota. It's now managed by a nonprofit. And so one of the things that I really like about this resource is that they have a large collection of educational materials and template information that professionals can use when working with homeowners. So it also includes tools that allow a contractor or wastewater professional to enter information about a specific property or septic system. And so you can use that information to generate a customized PDF guide, and then you give that guide to the homeowner. And so this guide explains the system, it documents important details about the site, and it gives the homeowner a valuable reference for operating and maintaining their system. And so no single resource can account for every single septic system design and every site condition across the United States. But onsitewastewater.info does a very good job of covering the majority of situations that professionals and homeowners are likely to encounter. So it's a practical resource for both education and communication, and it helps system owners better understand what they have and how to take care of it. Again, I come back to the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, or RCAP. RCAP does work with those 6 regional partner organizations across the country. And so I highly recommend that you find out which regional organization serves your state and become familiar with the resources that they offer. So, for example, I'm here in Illinois. So, our regional partner is the Great Lakes Community Action Partnership. If you're looking for assistance or information, that's the organization that I would start with. So, regardless of where you live, though, the RCAP network offers a wide range of programs and services that support rural communities. And so while many people know RCAP for its work with water and wastewater, the program actually extends much farther than that. They also provide assistance with housing, community development, childcare, infrastructure improvements, technical assistance, and other rural community needs. So it's a great partnership to have. With RCAP, here at the Water Survey, we did work with other professionals in the wastewater industry, and we designed the on-site wastewater treatment system, or OWTS assessment tool. And we released this in the fall of 2023 to help wastewater professionals perform more comprehensive system evaluations. The assessment is a fillable PDF that can be taken directly into the field and um, used by environmental health professionals, septic contractors, and others who inspect on-site systems. Um, it really needs to be done with someone who knows their way around a septic system, because you get a lot more out of it than if a homeowner were trying to figure out how to use it themselves. So the point of this is to guide the user through the evaluation of the septic system and then help you document any important observations that you make while you're out in the field. We also have a companion assessment tool for private wells. So both a well and a septic system could be evaluated during the same site visit when appropriate. So one of the biggest benefits of these assessment tools is that they help improve communication between the assessor and the homeowner. So rather than relying on scattered notes or verbal explanations, the homeowner receives a single document that provides a clear overview of their system and its condition at the time of the assessment. And so this tool includes photographs, a diagram, um, site information, and other details that really give a complete snapshot of the system on the day of the assessment. And so this can be extremely valuable for record keeping, for future maintenance, and just to help the homeowner better understand the infrastructure that's on their property. Now, both the well assessment and the septic assessment tools are available through the private well class website, and they can be downloaded for use by professionals working in the field. One of the questions that we received prior to the webinar, someone wanted to know what are some of the best practices um, for using these tools, especially when you're combining the private well assessment and the OWT assessment together on a property. And so for me, The best thing that I can do before I go out to do an assessment is I try and do as much homework as I can before I go out there. So I try to get any, if there's a septic drawing on file at the local health department, I try and get a hold of that before I go out so I know what I'm looking for. I also make sure that I look at Google Earth and try and identify from a bird's eye view if there might be any potential things that could cause this system to be vulnerable. So looking at things like that before you go out in the field, I feel that helps give you a big picture before you go out there and step on the property for the first time. With the well assessment, we do have a guide that goes along with it. And so that guide really walks you through every step of it. The septic system's still in its pilot program. And so hopefully in the next couple of years, once we get feedback on how people like the tool, we'll revamp it a little bit and then we'll try and design a guide that goes along with that. So I hope using the guide and trying to put together as much as you can before you go out um, will help make it a little easier to do those assessments. I'm going to take a quick drink here, real quick. So, I, as I said, I work at the Illinois State Water Survey, and I work for the Water and Public Health Program. And so in our program, we actually cover three websites. We have the private well class, we have wateroperator.org, and then our newest website is decentralizedwastewater.org. And so since this is the septic webinar, and again, the questions indicate that there's a lot of environmental health professionals that we're planning on attending. So I wanted to take some time today to introduce our website a little bit more to this audience. I've never really gone through it on one of our webinars before. So I'm just going to take a couple minutes here to explain what this website is and how it can help you. So decentralizedwastewater.org it's a clearinghouse. So we go out and we find continuing education training events and free resources, and we try and put them all in one place so you don't have to go and try and find this stuff. In the wastewater industry, continuing education is a requirement for many licenses and certifications. And so we understand how important it is to find those trainings. Um, so we have developed this website to try and make it a little easier to access that stuff. So the first thing that I'll point out is that we do have an event calendar. And so whenever you're needing that training, you can come to our event calendar. And then you can filter it in 4 different ways. So you can choose category, type, state, or sponsor. And so there are 20 categories that include certification, license, exam prep, consumer information, operation and maintenance, and system design, as well as many others. And then for the type, our resources come in a variety of formats. So whether it's a fact sheet, a newsletter, or a video, we try any resource that we find that we feel would be very helpful. We try and put those on here. You can also filter by the state that you live in. And then for the sponsors, we've actually featured events and resources from over 100 organizations across the nation. Um, so we're still growing. So if you know of an organization that's not on this website, or you have a document that you reference weekly that you feel is great and you want to make sure that it's available to people, please let us know because um, we're still developing, we're still growing, we're still gathering information, And the more information we have, the better tool this will be. So I just did um, a quick search here, and so I just picked a state. I just recently updated North Carolina, so I knew that there were some July events. July is not a very popular time for septic training because everybody's out in the field trying to get all their job done. But North Carolina does have several trainings. So, you just find your state, click on it, and anything that's available for that month pops up. And so if we would say, click on the event for July 13th, then the pop-up window comes up and, you see that it has the details of the event. And so you can see the dates, the times, the location, and then we write out a written description so you can get a quick snippet of if this training would be good for you or not. So if that fits what you're looking for, then you can proceed directly to the sponsor's website. Or if not, you just simply click out of the pop-up and you can continue your search then. We also have a resource library. Again, it filters the same way as the calendar, except for instead of sponsor, it's host. And so you can use those filters to find specific resources that you're looking for. We had an EHP put in a question wanting to know, where they could find different diagrams and more information about all the different types of septic systems that are out there. And um, while they were looking, if I understood correctly, they wanted to know if there was one document. I don't know of one document that exists, but our resource library is a great one-stop shop to be able to search and try and find several different resources from one resource, from one website. So with it, um, again, you can search by state. So I just chose the state of Missouri, and then we chose a keyword. So I was just, what information do we have out there about drip irrigation? So I just put in the word drip just to make it simple, see what comes up. And so I could, for the state of Missouri, I have 37 records that have the keyword drip in it. So I can look through those um, resources and I can see which ones I like, what ones fit what I'm looking for the best, um, and find my resources that way. If you're looking for something specific and you already know what you're looking for, so say you went to a meeting in Missouri, you talked to someone from Missouri Small Flows, and you remembered that they had information out there in a fact sheet form on drip irrigation. So you can filter it down as much as you want. This came up with only two, so we went from 37 down to two. And so if we want something to give to homeowners, we click on that orange link and then up pops our homeowner's guide to drip irrigation systems from Missouri Small Flows. So, I encourage you to go to the website, see what we have to offer, and check out the different resources that we have available. In addition to our calendar and our library, we also have a blog and a newsletter. So if you're in the industry and you're wanting to keep on top of topics and new things that are coming out, I recommend that you check out our blog and sign up for our newsletter. Laura Schultz here at the Water and Public Health Program puts together our newsletters for us, and she does an excellent job. And so each month you'll get this newsletter in your inbox that you have featured articles, you have the featured webinars, highlight from another organization for an article that they've written. We also always feature a video and have a document from our resource library. And then my personal favorite is Laura does a great job of finding um, the septic tank in the news. So I always enjoy seeing what she can come up with for all those different articles. So if you are an EHP or in the industry, I highly recommend that you sign up for our newsletter and stay in touch with us that way. So I have mentioned several times now that I am with the private well class. This is our website, so you can find us at privatewellclass.org, which you see up here at the top. And so from our homepage, you can go to all of our different offerings that we have. But before we go into that, what all do we offer? So what is the private well class? Well, we have the class itself, and then we have the program as the whole. And the program as the whole covers all of these things. So with our class, it is a free 10 lesson curriculum for private well owners. And so you sign up for it, and we send you an email once a week for 10 weeks. It's self-paced, it's in a PDF form, and so you can learn about your private well, everything from groundwater to geology to troubleshooting your well. And so we try to give you the education to make you a better well owner. We also have these free monthly webinars. These are not to be confused with the class. They are two separate things. So we have the class and then we have these monthly webinars. We also have our partner newsletter, social media, and a YouTube page. And then in April of 2024, we launched the National Private Well Help Center. And so, again, all of those things can be found at our website. As a homeowner, you are interested in enrolling in the class, we encourage you to go to our website, go to enroll in class at the top of the page, click on the green button, and then it's going to bring you to the form to fill out. So you just have to provide your name and email. We do ask that you provide your location. Since we are funded by the US EPA, it's always great that we can show the reach of helping people across multiple states. So we ask that you provide that information just so we can have those metrics to pass along. The class comes in English and in Spanish. So if you have well owners who speak Spanish who need to or who are interested in learning more about their well, we do also have it in Spanish, and so you can pass that on to them. And then, like I said, we do have these monthly webinars. So once a month, we hold a webinar. Some of the webinars, like this one, we only hold once a year. It's a specialty, but then others, like the one coming up next month, is my water safe to drink common questions about private wells. We try and have that one a couple times a year. So more people can join and listen and get that basic knowledge. Our next webinar will be held on August 12th. So if you're interested, you can come to our website and register for next month's webinar here. Now, I mentioned that we launched the Private Well Help Center that started in April of 2024, and we developed this to help meet the needs of well owners and professionals um, by helping them find information, and by also being able to provide our advice to them. So we have a phone number, the knowledge base, and a chat. And all of this was designed with an internally developed AI. So it gives you quick responses in the manner of a chatbot, but it is only pulling from the information we have fed it. And so it it's our way of making sure that you get the best information out there and it's not being cluttered up with material from less than reputable resources. Sarah Manderbach and I manage this program, so if you contact us through the Hope Center, you'll most likely speak to one of us, or Katie also helps us out on that. And so, one of the biggest compliments that we get is, "I can't believe a real person answered the phone." And so we do our best to try to work with the callers that call in and make sure that we can provide them the best information out there. Again, you can interact with us three ways. You can call us on our helpline. You can search articles. Our Help Center has over 160 articles now on the basics of um, private wells. You can ask our chatbot, and you can always just reach out to us, and we'll be happy to help. I have to say that with the introduction of the help centers, the more articles I get out there, the calls that we're are getting a little more complex. And so we believe people are using the Help Center to get those simpler questions answered, and then waiting to call or send an email when they have a little more unique situation going on. We also have our YouTube page, and so this webinar, as well as all of our others, are put on our YouTube page, so you can go back and view them. And then we also have 21 training videos, and so you can also watch those different training videos and get some basics. So we have everything from what is an aquifer to um, how do wells get contaminated to how does my pressure tank work. And so you can go to our YouTube page and check out those videos. Now, Steve Wilson and his wife Jennifer, who also works here at the Water Survey, they have a special project that is Tap Talk, the Drinking Water in Rural America podcast. And they do a really great job of covering both private wells and um, small water systems and try and provide different experts from across the United States. So I've picked four from the last season that has been published that kind of pertain towards wastewater and private wells, as well as we had the Illinois state climatologist come on and talk about this year's El Nino, just to make sure that everyone is aware of these different topics that are going on. We also had Tom DeBell from Vermont Department of Health. He came on to talk about the flash drought that they experienced. Sarah Hager is, in my opinion, she is probably the number one person when it comes to on-site wastewater treatment systems. She is a wealth of knowledge, and I'm learned something every time I talk to Sarah. And then the last one is Katie Maglia with Water Quality Investigations, and she spoke about Legionella in water systems. So again, I encourage you to check out Tap Talk and listen to the podcast. So now it's time to move on to today's questions and answers. Katie, is Jim on?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, so he's here. Let me unmute him. So he's currently muted. So let me find him. All right, Jim, I'm going to unmute you. I'm going to enable your microphone.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good
Perfect.
afternoon, Jim. Thank you for joining us. Just to get the Q&A portion started, I just wanted to let everyone know that this first part is going to be the questions that were submitted when you registered for the webinar. And Jim has graciously volunteered to provide his expertise and answer these questions for us. So, Jim, if you wouldn't mind giving us just a little bit of who you are and um, what you have done in your past to be our go-to for answering these Q&A sessions.
Sure. I work for RCAP Solutions. I'm the regional director for the North, for the Southern New England region, which is Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. I've been with RCAP for what, a good 18 years now. Before that, I was at a local board of health, being a sanitarian, amongst other things, working with private wells and septic systems repairs, installs, etc. So I've been working with the water wastewater world for the last 25 years, if you will. I just want to mention too, Sally, you mentioned about the RCAPs. I want to just double down on it and just say, get a hold of your local RCAP Solutions region. We have funding specifically to do trainings for homeowners, sanitarians, in water and in on-site wastewater and private wells. So you get a hold of each one of your regions, they'll get you in contact with the person. But we have funding to do trainings perfectly free with CEUs. So definitely use those assets, as well as, if you're a local health department and people call you with a private well problem, refer them to your local RCAP, because they do have funding to do what we call private well assessments. We do a number of them in my region. Most of them, not most of them, but quite a few of them for bacterial problems when people do test their water and find they have total coliform or E. coli.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Jim. So we'll just jump right into our questions then. So the first question is, how close can construction safely get to a tank after installation?
So I'm going to take this question as it's installed, it's been backfilled, the septic tank is in the ground with soil supporting it. Um, I say you can get, within 10 feet of the tank, if you will. At that point, I would not drive over any of the components you put in the ground. But once it's backfilled and in the ground, it's pretty secure. But I would still, yellow tape off around the actual components, the septic tank, the D box, and especially the leach field. You do not want a bulldozer driving over that after you install it.
Exactly. Okay, next question. How do I know when I need to fix or replace the septic tank or septic system?
Well, the septic, both of them really would be during your pumping, if the average homeowner. The septic tank, really, when you pump it down, that's a good point to actually inspect the tank, see the structural integrity is good for it. Another thing I've seen quite a lot of is the seal between the pipe and the septic tank can fail at the septic tank. So the outlet, so basically all your water kind of just drips down below the outlet tank, outlet pipe below it, instead of going through the pipe into the D box. I've actually done a system inspection, what we call Title V here in Massachusetts, and opened up a D box, which is completely dry because all the water was basically going right next to the septic tank into the ground, and just had good soil, and it was a dry period, so you couldn't notice it and see it at the surface. The septic system itself really would be at the leach fields, usually the part that fails. You would see the grass greener, like like the picture Sally showed during her presentation, or when you're opening up the septic tank of the D box, seeing it at a higher level than what should be the normal operating level. The D box, more water going in there and not flowing out, if you will. In the D box, just being higher up on that outlet pipe than it really should be would give you the occurrence that'd be a failure, if you will. or you can even see where water levels in the septic tank or the D box have previously been by water levels. So it might, even when you open it up, it might not be at failure level at that point, but you can see it had problems in the past, if you will, from the water levels you can see in the tanks.
Okay. The next question, what implications, including lenders/loan, are there if a septic is permitted for fewer bedrooms than exist in the home?
I would imagine there'd be implications all around. In Massachusetts, we have requirements, what's called a Title V inspection to change property, which requires an inspection by someone like myself, which would look into all the records, what the system's built for, what the actual bedrooms are in the house now. It becomes such an issue that some boards of health here in Massachusetts will actually put a deed restriction on the property. Um, saying there's an innovative alternative system to put a deed restriction, or if it's kind of borderline that they put a game room in, it might be used as a bedroom. They might put a deed restriction in that it is a 4-bedroom home built with a 4-bedroom septic system. Kind of prevents the game room from getting a closet built and becoming a 5-bedroom house, if you will.
Sure.
So there's the legal environmental law, but I imagine that would then bleed over into the problems with your loan and the lenders, and a lot of lenders, want to have some sort of inspection for those components and a well test before they allow their funding to be used. So
Okay. Now on to next page here. What is the recommended slope and length of septic leach field drain pipes?
I would recommend, and you might hear this a lot with a lot of the questions, is revert back to your local code. I work in 3 states. Each state has a different septic code, and they do not line up in so many different things. And being 3 little small states that could basically fit within another state, no problem. It's pretty amazing, the different codes. So it really goes back to your local laws, what they are. You'd be so surprised the difference between just our 3 states. Yeah, the length of your septic leach field pipes, a lot of factors on that. The soil conditions, the kind of lot you have. If you have a long, skinny lot, you're going to have longer leach pipes to make sure you have that field coverage that's required. If you have a wider lot, you can do smaller portions, but more of them. So it's really site specific and local code specific.
When your septic system was installed prior to records being recorded, is there a technique for finding or mapping the septic tank and drain field?
Yeah, I mean, you always start from the basement and looking where the waste pipe goes out, of course. So at least you know which part of the yard we're looking at. From there, there's ways to probe, if you will, with a skinny metal but probe, but something that has some, can take a punch too. And slowly kind of go into the yard till you hit the septic tank. You kind of probe around the septic tank and make, okay, this is where the septic tank is, and then go in front of that. Kind of do the same for the D box again. Don't go too hard. There is fiberglass tanks out there. They're not as common as cement, but they could be. The leach field, after you find the D box, probably gonna be right in front of that. That usually takes some sort of digging. Let's find out where the pipes might be, how far they go, because you can't really probe that. But that's kind of like the only way to do it if the system's already in the ground, if you will, and there's no records whatsoever where it might be. There's also there is the snakes that are available that can kind of show the, I don't know how we want to call it, GIS, if you will, to where that probe is. So there are companies too that could snake it down and have that sort of probe to the top, and they can know where it in the system. So there is those things I've seen also. The more high tech way to do it, I guess.
Yeah. And what are the top 5 things that you should keep constant maintenance of and its time schedule?
For a homeowner, I would break it down to two things. Number one thing is what you're putting down the drain. Um, if you don't put things down the drain that aren't supposed to be there, you're not going to have as much problems of pumping down the road. So the average homeowner, I think, so those are the two top things is, like you mentioned, nothing but human waste and toilet paper, and then, um, and come up and keep a pumping schedule based on, how large your house is and how many people are in it. If you're a 4-bedroom house, which is both 8 people, and there's only 2 of you in the house, obviously it can go a lot longer and you're not abusing the system. I've seen combined septic systems from like, apartment complex that, within 6 months, it's full of grease and flushable wipes and you got to pump it. So, it's really how you maintain it and how often you have will dictate how often you have to pump it. Basically, how much solids you're putting down there. If you're putting grease and flushable wipes down every day, then it's going to be a lot more pumping and probably going to, take years off your septic system in the long run.
Definitely. So how close can downspout pop-up or sump pump discharges be to a septic field?
I would try to get them as far away as possible and not proximity as well as the slope of where they're coming out. They could be 100 feet away if it's getting dumped down into a big slope and then right onto a leach field. So it's all about where that water is. I would try to keep it as far away as possible. Where it's flowing to, you do not want it to flow towards your leach field. You want to keep the extra water down there to a, absolute minimum other than rain.
Is it possible to overload your septic system by doing household laundry?
It is. It is. If you have a large family, you do quite a lot of loads of laundry. You really want to stagger them. You don't want to Sunday be a wash day and you do 10 loads. Plus everyone's at the house. You put a lot of flow down there. So if you can stagger your laundry loads, it's good. It's also the detergents. You're putting quite a lot of dose of a detergent down your drain at the same time too. So the accumulation of it all at the same time might have negative effects on the biological processes.
I was saying that leads us right into your next question. With regards to liquids being put in a septic system, have you heard of issues with certain laundry detergents causing the formation of film or clogging the system?
It's a new one to me actually. When I saw this, I kind of looked in it. I have not seen too much, but I wouldn't put it past that there's some detergents that have some sort of coagulation to it that would make the oils kind of come together, if you will. If you put a lot of grease down your drain, what I've seen in like centralized wastewater called like fatbergs, if you will, like big things of
Right.
grease. So I don't know exactly what brands or anything else, but I can see it, the degreasing elements of some laundry detergents that maybe it does have some sort of coagulation that would make it come together into a big problem.
What would be the main considerations for real estate agents to know about septic systems for buyers and sellers?
Well, the sellers definitely, I would say, real estate agents should know the law. Like I mentioned, here in Massachusetts, we have a law that requires a formal inspection by a licensed inspector, and that documentation is part of the real estate transfer, which is well established here in Massachusetts by this point. If you're representing a buyer, I think the real estate agent should really brief them on really getting a good inspection, even if it's not required by the state. And what I mean by a really good inspection is opening up the components, opening up the septic tank, opening up the D box, taking a look at where the water levels are, what past water levels are, and letting the buyers know that too, that they have if this system fails, it is a multi-thousand-dollar fix, if you will, especially depending on where it's located, like the home on Lake Superior, or you have a oceanfront property, or all sorts of issues depending on what state you're in. But usually, the more desirable places to have your home are the more expensive places to put a septic system in, because water features, etc.
Mhm. Okay. I just bought a house with a septic system and it's been mostly idle for the past 9 months. Do I need to do anything to restart it? It was last pumped out in 2024.
I wouldn't say there's something ideally to restart it other than what you normally do. I wouldn't have a house party, invite the whole family over at the same time to restart it like that. Soils can become hydrophobic, if you will, if they haven't got a lot of moisture for a while. So a slow, constant restart for the field might be a better idea than, like I said, having a family party to celebrate the new home. Um, I've seen it some kind of vacation homes too. You know, People move in, the place is set idle all winter. Memorial Day comes, they have a big party, whole family comes up, and the system just can't take it because it's been dormant for 6 months, and then all of a sudden it's from 0 to 100. So, I would
Yeah.
take it slow but sure at the beginning. Make sure everything's running right.
Okay. What is the nitrogen reducing tank's value? What are the advantages and disadvantages?
Well, advantages, of course, are the nitrogen reducing values. I mean, I've seen some of these technologies bring nitrogen levels down to, drinking water values, below drinking water values. Um, the disadvantages are, though, these systems are much more complex. They have more pumps, they have more septic tank chambers. Some of them have denitrification chambers. Some of them are going to require you to have an operator at least come by once a year, twice a year, put reports out. Sampling sometimes required. So power usage. Some of these systems have huge blowers for denitrification, which kind of nitrify before they denitrify, which use a lot of electricity. So the advantages of they work and the nitrogen does get taken care of. Disadvantages are they're much more expensive to operate and install. So
Yeah, the more parts and pieces, the easier it is for it to break.
exactly, exactly.
So, how do I know if cleaning products are safe for my septic system? Also, are wipes bad for septic systems? Which we've already touched on wipes. So,
Yes, cleaning products. I would assume they're all not going to be good for the septic system. It's we want to minimize how much we use them. I'd say don't use them at all. I mean, no one wants a dirty toilet. Um, but the minimization of what you put down the drain is the better option. But again, when you're putting stuff in the drain, especially something that has an antibacterial component to it, it's just going to mess with the biology of the septic tank, which is breaking down the human waste, if you will. And yeah, wipes definitely no good. They do say flushable, and they are flushable. They do, after they get by the flushing part is where the problem happens. And that is if you're on city sewer or you're in a septic system. They are detrimental to both. Both reasons are they
okay.
do not break down in that septic tank. I've mentioned the apartment complex we're working with now, actually doing a training for them in a week or two for the residents up there, trying to encourage them not to put their grease in wipes down the tank, down the drain, because like I mentioned, we just did a full rehab of the system. And 6 months into it, the operators went by and you could walk across the top of the septic tank, which is amazing for 6 months of usage.
That's incredible that they filled it up that fast.
Yeah, we yeah, we were pretty impressed too. And this was a 10,000 gallon septic tank, so it was a very large tank, and
I was
for it
getting
to be
ready to
full.
ask what size it was.
Yeah, it was 10,000 gallons. It's 28 unit, single bedroom units, if you will. But yeah, within 6 months, though, it is wow.
Wow, that's that's incredible. Okay, so how will tree roots affect the septic system throughout the yard? And I didn't include it, but I also someone did ask what kind of landscaping they should put on a mound system. I don't know if you have too many mound systems out where you're out, but if you'd also like to touch on mound systems, I thought this would be
Oh
a
yeah,
good
we have
place to
we
do
have
that.
tons of mound systems in Massachusetts. We're 4 feet to groundwater here, so and once you get on the Cape, you can be 5 to 6 feet. So we have lots of mound systems here in Massachusetts.
Sure.
Really the same as a leach field. Just grass really is what you really want to be growing. Tree roots, you think about it like any kind of pipe. You might have heard of like your soil line coming out. The tree roots can get in there and just kind of clog it up. Even more so and even easier with septic leach field. Keep in mind the septic leach field has perforated pipe and not pipe that's glued together or welded together depending on the age. So they're actually already holes. So the trees will love to get in there. It's plenty of moisture, great nutrients. And once it gets in there, it's just going to keep growing its roots within the septic system pipe. Pretty soon, there's no room for the effluent from the water from the house to get through the pipe, and then you fill your system. So we always recommend definitely no trees on the leach field. Sometimes you find it's too, you deal with a homeowner and it's too late. The trees are already well established. You probably would do more bad than good if you were to remove the trees at that point, but really just kind of keep them down, keep the trees down. I know there's another question of can keep the leach field go wild, if you will. I don't think that'd be a problem, at least, but I would say at least once a year, go through that wildness and cut it down because to make sure, because within that wildness are going to be trees that start to take root. And once they start getting tall enough and the roots go deep enough, they are going to get into that leach field and then, clog your pipes.
Yeah, and it would also camouflage if you have any problems going on. It might take longer to notice that you have, effluent surfacing on the ground if you have, because I'm picturing, like tall wildflowers and grasses type thing over it.
Yes, yes. I went to a homeowner, I think about a month ago, and the leach field had probably 20, 30-year-old trees in it. And it's like, well, at this point, I'd probably just keep the trees.
If you start pulling the roots up, you're going to pull your system up too.
Yeah, just, dropping trees like that, I imagine that would just damage the system too. And then,
Yeah,
these are very heavy, maples and oaks, that once they slam to the ground, I imagine they would just break the
large
PVC
trees.
underneath too. So,
Okay. So, do septic systems produce nitrate and pollute groundwater?
septic systems do not produce it; the humans do. Human urine has quite a lot of nitrogen in it. Yes, they do. The septic systems will help break down the nitrate to a point, but without denitrification, it doesn't do it as well. But there is some kind of nitrogen breakdown in a traditional septic system, but in some areas it just isn't enough. Like here in Massachusetts, Cape Cod, we have a big problem with parts of the Cape with nitrogen polluting the kettle ponds and causing all sorts of algae growth and whatnot. So they're finding that a traditional septic system isn't good enough in that area. They have very sandy soils, so you need to up the game. So
I know a system should be pumped out every 3 to 5 years, but should it be inspected more frequently than that? What should an inspection cover?
I would say, unless you have an effluent filter in there, which would be on the outlet of your septic tank, it would catch basically grease from leaving the system. Then you'd probably be good with just doing the pumping, and take a look at your leach field in the yard, and notice if you hear any goggling, etc., like that. But the average homeowner, that's really um, that you'd be more than fine with just doing that, if you will.
So please cover additives. This is one of the biggest questions I get as a sanitarian.
Yes, there is a very popular, very popular. The the answer really, is 9 times out of 10, is no, they're not needed. We put quite a lot of our own additives down within our human waste. There are some additives that are approved here in Massachusetts for system regeneration. This would be if people are having problems with their leach field, whether it be the biomat got too thick, or there's grease blocking it. There is some technologies that has additives and usually some oxygen added to the system to help break down that blockage in the leach field. And I know that's approved, so that'd be like a special case. But just at a normal, once a month, I dump this down the tank. It's really not needed.
And then, just carry down to should digestive enzymes be added to the system? Why or why not? My thought here was just kind of explaining what digestive enzymes are.
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend that we don't need it too. Then that no bacteria would be there. I mean, you're just going to add more of what's there, if you will. But I think that nature's going to take its process, without our help, if you will.
Okay, these are the last three questions for this, and then we'll be moving on to today's questions. So, what is your opinion on do-it-yourself septic aerator kits? Where you can find this, and where can you find design info for do-it-yourselfers?
Well, first of all, check if it's legal to be a do-it-yourselfer. Most of the states I work in, it is not. You have to have some sort of septic installer permit and what we call a repair permit. I have no experience with do-it-yourself aeration kits, if you will. Only technology that's approved to be installed on systems here in either Massachusetts or Connecticut. So I mean, or Rhode Island. But yeah, I have no experience with any do-it-yourself kits, if you will. But I would caution you about doing any work in your own septic system before you know that you can actually do it legally.
Yeah, and I fully agree. It's even if your state does allow you to do it yourself, make sure that you have the ability to do it yourself and you completely understand the rules and the regulations and why they are there before you try to take it on yourself.
Yeah, and you know what you're doing too. I mean, if you're just throwing, a bubbler basically into your septic tank, that might mess up the settling of the septic tank because now you're moving the water unnaturally, basically within a septic tank. The idea is the water to kind of settle, the grease go to the top, the solids go to the bottom, and that nice clean effluent in the middle. Well, I wouldn't say all clean, but cleaner
Cleaner.
effluent moves along. If you're bubbling up, you might be bubbling up your solids from the bottom or moving the grease that made you go into the system. You might end up just bringing stuff along. Usually, the aeration that I've seen, the systems are separate tanks after the primary septic tank, where all that solids has already been taken out. The idea is this is kind of like the further treatment.
So, is there a big difference between the design of a system with a vent pipe and a system without a vent pipe?
Well, the biggest difference is going to be oxygen, more oxygen and probably faster breakdown of the waste. I've seen, and I think Sal, you mentioned this, that people don't like the candy cane in their yard and they cut it off and cap it. I've actually worked with a sizable apartment building that did the same thing. It was on there as built. And where's the candy cane? Candy cane's not there anymore. Well, the reason why I was there because, well, they kept having to pump their septic tank much more frequently because nothing was breaking down. Lack of oxygen because the system was built with a vent, and all of a sudden they took it away. So again, if the system was built with the vent, keep the vent. It's going to add more oxygen to the system, because if that, we're only talking about whatever's coming through from your vent up top of your house. If you have the vent coming out from the field and from the house, then you at least have an exchange of oxygen throughout the whole pipe.
And last, what detailed items does a septic evaluator look for at a septic evaluation, and how? What tools do you use?
So if you're talking about the septic evaluation tool, I mean, the number one thing I get for that kind of for that evaluation is the records. The as-built records, our Title V inspection, some sort of information what's in the ground, because you get there, really all you can see is the lawn, maybe a manhole where the septic tank is. So that's the number one thing I use for the septic evaluation is the records, and then taking a look on site and asking questions of the homeowner. Really, that's all you have. Now, if you're talking about a full septic inspection, which I would say that's when I got to open up every hole, every basically manhole you got to open up. The front of the septic tank, back of the septic tank, the D blocks. Maybe dig a few holes at the leach area just to make sure everything's looking good a little bit underneath the surface. There's nothing pooling above the pipe. Everything's going down below the pipe. And with that's a much more in-depth inspection. That's when we're talking about sludge judges and the like. But a simple septic evaluator, the biggest thing is getting those records. If there's a record on it, then you're going to be able to fill up a lot more of those blanks than if you're not.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we have 3 minutes left, Jim. So we will move over to the questions that people have submitted for today. I don't know how long you can stay on for. Typically, we try and answer all the questions that people do, but I don't know if you're on a time restraint or not.
No, I can answer.
Let's see. No, there's several. So we'll just start and see see how far we get here. Okay, so please explain what a mound system is versus a conventional system.
So a mound system would be a place where a conventional system, we don't have enough clearance between the groundwater table and the top of the septic system with the leach field where the pipe's going to put the water out. Each state has different rules. Here in Massachusetts, it's at least 4 feet. It could be up to 6 feet, depending, if you're on the Cape, if you will. And a mound system is exactly what it sounds like. You just bring it in appropriate soil and mounding it up. And then putting the leach field on top of that mound. And it usually requires a pump chamber. So you have a septic tank, and then instead of a D box, you'll have a pump chamber that will pump it up the hill, up to the mound, and then the water will go under there. So the whole point of it really is to get that extra space of soil that has not been saturated, never has been saturated. Treat the water before it hits the groundwater table.
How would the adverse effects of seasonal weather conditions, especially heavy rain, on a leach field manifest itself?
Well, I mean, sometimes when you have those 100-year storms, the best bet is just to let it dry out. There's been a hurricane, a few years back. We had some systems that just weren't functioning as normal, but after it dried out, things started working better. Those adverse seasonal things, the best idea is to leave it off, leave it lower flow, if you will. But it is going to show you when you have a problem. But a properly installed septic system really, like I mentioned, should have that area of undisturbed soil that has never been saturated above it. So you have that, that 2 to 4 feet of space before your leach field is basically, underwater. Um, but there is going to be those times that, we just had a storm and some of the southern New England towns got 6, 7 inches. Well, there might have been problems, Best thing I did is just let the field dry out and see what happens. And I've seen trenches that were getting more flow than other trenches. We turned them off, used the rest of the other trenches, turned the other trench on in a year, and it was able to regenerate itself and work as normal. So,
So, question on using bleach for cleaning things. When one has a septic system, for example, I am noticing black mold on my hummingbird feeders or on water bottle straws and lids. In the past, we have lived in the city with a country sewer. I would clean soak and bleach water in the sink or in a bucket and empty down the sink or laundry deep sink. Can one do the same with septic? If not, any suggestions?
I mean, if you're doing it every so often with bleach, then I wouldn't say it's a big deal. And bleach, I think, Sally, you mentioned this, is one of the less um, problematic issues, if you will. Bleach has a, kind of when the free chlorine goes away, it really has no more effect on the bacteria, as like a quaternary ammonia, which is very common in a lot of cleaners. Just keep killing. you know,
It
um,
stays there.
yeah. So bleach is the less of the two evils, if you will. I mean, the idea is not to don't worry about not putting anything down the system, but you still have to live, but try to minimize it. In bleach too, if you let it sit out for a number of hours, it's going to lose its ability. The chlorine dissipates, and you basically have a bucket of water. So that might be another option too, is just let it sit out overnight and then dump it down the drain, or let it sit out overnight, lose its bleach, and then put it into the ground, if you will, after it's been dechlorinated. But once you're cleaning, so you're going to break down the bleach at that point, and then the rest will probably dissipate by the next day, I would imagine, unless you use a serious residue or concentration.
Yeah, yeah, you would have to have a lot of bleach in there for it to last that long. Okay, so next question. Great presentation so far. Hopefully you will also address drain fields and what one can plant on drain fields, and if any gardening is allowed to include vegetables, or even if one could put things like solar panels combined with some green plants.
Usually, when you say drain field, that's when I say leach field, I kind of mean the same thing. Um, yeah, I mean, ideally, it's just lawn, if you will. Gardening all on it. There's a possibility of raw sewage getting up into there. You're watering the garden, so you're putting more water onto that site going down into the ground. So ideally, it's probably best to just keep it as just lawn. I know it gets boring. I know it's pretty boring. you know,
Yeah.
I mean, a solar panel, if it was movable and not too heavy, possibly. Again, movable, because if you have a problem, you don't have to disassemble your solar system to get to the leach field, and not too heavy because you really don't want to have excessive weight going down on your pipes, and you sort of really could crush them, or compact the ground down, which then affects the ability for water to move through it.
So my other thought with solar panels is, how far down do you have to anchor a solar panel like that? If you couldn't have, one that's there all the time, like the big panels that you see popping up all over the place, you wouldn't be able to anchor one because it would have to go too deep and would interfere with the system then.
Yeah, good point. I mean, you'd be punching a hole right through your
Yeah,
your
probably right through your trench because anytime you dig a hole, you hit where right where the pipe is. So, any guidelines on driving over a system or drain field? Hopefully, a zero turn mower or an ATV is okay. What about a pickup truck?
I would say the mower is fine. A light ATV probably not gonna have big problems. Pickup truck, no way. Now you're talking, you're getting heavy. It's just not worth it. It's just not worth the weight. If you crack one of those PVC pipes and you go and replace it, it's a very expensive endeavor.
When it comes to household cleansers and pipe clearing liquids, how reliable are septic safe labels? And is there a definitive online resource for determining what is and isn't safe?
I am not sure. I've seen the septic safe label. I do not know what goes behind that. Um, I like to say it gives you some protection, but I couldn't say. I'm not
I,
sure of any the certification behind that or whatever it does to make that, acceptable.
I, I can't say positively, but Laura Schultz, who does our decentralizedwastewater.org blog post, I'm 90% sure that she has done a blog post on septic safe labels. So if you go to decentralizedwastewater.org and look at the blogs, you can do a search at the top of the page and do septic safe. And I'm 90% sure that Laura's written an article about um, those labels. And so that would be, if you want to email us, I can get that information from Laura and get that to you. So the next one is how much sludge is acceptable in the bottom and top of the septic tank?
um, well, everything I've seen, when you get to about 30 to 50% solids, that's when to pump. The sludge would really be at the bottom, the grease would be up top. The sludge is really the one that's going to accumulate most of the time. But once you get around that 30 to 50% of your tank being full, that's time to pump, if you will.
Next one, how regularly to measure solids versus how often to pump using a sludge judge. I am assuming a homeowner cannot do this, so one has to pay for a professional visit.
Yeah, the average homeowner is not going to have a sludge judge on hand. I mean, I think the best bet for a homeowner is, if you have a reliable septic pumper that you can trust, and they come, and they're there, and just kind of, could I go on another year? Could I go on another 2 years? And look at their opinion from there, and then kind of take it from that advice, unless something changes within your household, more people move in, etc. But if someone pumps it out and you have a reputable pumper that you can trust, and they say, you could have gone another couple of years, I would take their advice. If you really want to get into it, you can always pop the lid of the septic tank on the outlet side, and see what you have, and then on the inlet side, and see how deep it is on that side if you have a 2 compartment tank, which most come nowadays like that. And take a look at yourself. I mean, you'll be able to kind of notice if you have quite a heavy level at top, just by moving a stick, if you will, down there. If it looks a little too much, then probably is, if you will. But most people, you just leave it up to the professionals, if you will.
Okay, so the next one is a question for me. Where was that tank size household chart from again? So I'll have to, so it's the National Environmental Services Center pipeline fall from 2024. Um, if you want, I can, um, if you want to email us, I could get you a copy of that. Okay, so I was surprised by one of your slides mentioned that it was best to use bleach as a cleaner. I've been avoiding that. I understood bleach was an issue. Can you please clarify? I think we've already touched on bleach enough. Do
Mm-hmm.
you have anything else to add about bleach?
No, just saying that's probably the least of our problematic cleaners because, like I said, it wears out at a certain point once it's free chlorine has been used up. But other cleaners just keep going.
Okay, so my conventional system only has a riser access point at the inlet pipe. Should I be concerned about the longevity of the system due to when the tank is being pumped, the outlet side can't be seen or reached? Also, what is the average lifespan of a conventional system when properly maintained?
So I'm guessing you have a two compartment septic tank. So the inlet pipe would be the most critical to pump, if you will, because majority of the solids should be on that one side of the compartment, and then the second one gets cleaner, and then through the outlet pipe it gets even better. There is probably a manhole on the outlet side of your septic tank too. It's just not covered. It's just not uncovered, if you will. You got to dig down to see it. So that can be something you might want to do at some point just to see what's going on that side of the system. But you know, if you have a two compartment sink, I mean sink, two compartment septic tank, having the inlet pipe site open and pumped is probably the most critical, if you will. And the average lifespan of a system, I mean, I've seen a cesspool that's been working over 100 years. So, I've seen some conventional systems fail in 15. So it really, it really depends on install and use and how. But the average is, say 25 years.
My house's septic system was installed 1 year before records were maintained in my county. I do know where the septic tank is. What advice do you have on how I can locate my drain field location?
From the septic tank, I would keep following it out to find your D box, and then from there, your field should be right in front of it. Like I said, it's not gonna be as easy to find where your actual pipes are in the field, how big the field is, but a little bit of digging, it shouldn't be that deep down. These aren't, like a water line going in your house that, prone to freezing. This is coming out of your house and heated up, if you will. So it doesn't have to be as deep. So probably your best bet though, if you don't have any as-built plans or, a plan, blueprint.
Okay, so how do experts characterize laundry water and dishwashing water in the nothing but human waste and three P's? Are they considered human waste slash one of the P's? Question mark.
Uh,
I the way I take the three P's comment and how I is, your laundry water is just gray water, so you're not having to treat it quite like everything else. Dishwater or dishwasher water, if you're talking about like uh oh, I can't think of a dishwasher, that's installed. Um, that is considered black water. But we're talking about what you're putting down the toilet is the three P's. So it's things that you're flushing down the toilet is nothing but human waste, nothing but the three P's. Yes, it's okay to be using your sink and washing your dishes and doing the laundry. All that is included in your design. But for what you're flushing down the toilet, you want to keep it to a minimum of nothing but human waste. Is the way that I would answer that question. Do you agree with that, Jim?
yeah, exactly.
Okay. I have heard that laundry pods will cause problems.
I have not heard of any additional problems above normal detergent use, other
Uh,
than kids eating them. which is completely different topic. But
I was gonna say we're we're not doing TikTok trends today.
yeah, other than that, that's the only negative I've ever heard about him.
Like I say, I actually mentioned Sarah Hager earlier in the webinar, and I saw her at she did a presentation, and she actually did talk about laundry pods, and it's a piece of plastic that's going into your septic tank, and so it's going to have to be pumped out. So and the other thing you need to consider is what are in the pods. So look at the ingredients and make sure that there's nothing harmful for the septic system. Some of those will have quaternary ammonia in them as an extra cleaning agent, and that can be devastating to your septic system. So I know those are the points that Sarah pointed out about laundry pods. So, is there any value to biological additives you can buy online to flush into your septic system? Do
I
you have
wouldn't say
anything else to put on additives?
no,
I know,
not unless they're being used for a special use for like I mentioned, regenerating septic systems. The only time I've seen it approved and useful, if you will, and proven to be useful, I should say. These have been approved by the state of Massachusetts and proven at the septic demo facility on the Cape to work. So not everyone can just be on the list. So
sure. Okay. If water-based paint, brushes, rollers can't be washed down a septic, how do you suggest to clean them? How would the water be disposed of?
um, that's a tough one. I mean, I know they say latex paint nowadays you can just let it dry out and throw it in the trash. I've seen that in the waste things in the city I live in. It may be the same type of situation, but paint down your system really. I can't imagine that being good for the system. But that's a tough one. you
Well,
know?
and the thing is my question is how much paint? Yeah,
Yeah.
do you have a professional painting business where, you bring brushes home every day? Are you talking about one brush every 10 years when you spruce up the living room? Um, it's going to also be based on how much, paint you're actually talking about. If it's a brush, like I said, once every 10 years, I as long as you're cleaning the brush out as much as you can prior to washing it, it may not be, that big of an issue to rinse it out in the sink. But if it's a large amount, then I definitely want to put it down the into the septic system. Jim, I think we might be
All
to the
right.
last one. So personally, I had my system scoped when I thought there was a problem. They found an offset just outside the house. I dug it up and found a boot which was likely installed incorrectly originally. It had been allowing effluent into my perimeter drain since 1986. Any concerns?
Well, I mean, they found it and it's going in where it should now. So I wouldn't. I mean, if you have a private well, I'd probably have it tested for nitrate. Um, just to double make sure that's not having a problem into your well. But other than that, problem's been fixed. It's corrected now. As long as the well's not affected, then yeah, I'd say move on.
Yep. Okay. Well, I think we are at the end.
But I'm glad the perimeter drain didn't fail though, because that would be that wouldn't be a
Right.
it's one thing to get groundwater into your basement, it's another one to get that into your basement. So
I so I just wanted to come down here and just remind everyone that it is pre-approved for two um, continuing education credits from NEHA. And so if you requested um, CEs, we will be sending those out. You don't need to email us, but if you do have any questions or um, want to reach us, you can reach us at info@privatewellclass.org. So thank you so much for joining us for another year of Septic Systems 101. Jim, thank you so much for coming and answering the questions. It's always a pleasure to have you. And with that, I think we will end for the day. Everyone, have a great rest of your afternoon.